Listen, yes, the fact that you're thinking of a horror film in just a sexual matter is a failure within the horror film genre.
That's true.
Failure.
That's,
A whole failure?
A horror film is you're supposed to feel scared of it, not be sexually aroused to the film, which is what
That's
Scarlett is saying.
true. If
That's
I was
a
a
failure.
kid-
You don't think you can feel those things at the same time?
That would be
She's
interesting
only
to
thinking
depict.
sex, though. It's a horror film.
Alright, what up, you guys? I'm Brysin Smith.
And I'm Javin, and this is Who Cares? Woo! Yes. Clap, clap.
Alrighty, so I'm gonna let Javin introduce this topic.
So this is a little bit different from what we normally do. It's nighttime.
Not really.
We have done this in the past. I don't know if we've released these episodes, the ones we did at night. But
Right.
we're doing this from a different angle just because the lighting does
Right.
this nicer. We like it this way.
Right.
Candles, some of them keep going out, so don't mind that. So the topic we're going to be doing tonight is... Oh, I didn't even... This is our guest.
Scarlett
Scarlett
Senpai, you guys know her by now.
And we're covering are sex scenes necessary in horror movies?
Which really, I mean, I would answer that as they can be, but usually they're not.
Explain why that is the case.
Well, that's because of the writers. A lot of them are terrible.
Damn, you're just calling them out.
I mean, okay, so we could look at a few good examples of sex scenes in horror films, which I would bring up Midsummer, which is a great example,
Midsommar is an
and
excellent
Queen and
example.
Slim. Now, some people might controversize about whether Queen and Slim was a good film or not, but when you talk about the sex scene, I feel like it was convenient because it showed the connection between the two characters and how they grew a connection closer to each other. It worked for the film is what I'm trying to say. And in Midsummer, the sex scene, spoiler alert,
Yeah.
it was weird. It was very weird. But it kind of added to the aesthetic of the film because the film as a whole was weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sex scene worked for the film. Versus like let's say that Piranha movie.
I have not watched that movie. I have not watched that movie.
When you think about it, sex scenes, I just want to say before I go any further into the video, I know we got Scarlett Senpai on the channel, and she's like supposed to be the center of attention.
Yeah.
But I gotta say this. So back to Piranha. The sex. Okay, so sex and horror films have a interesting relationship because they usually apply a lot of sexual energy and scenes into horror films. Why? I don't know. I think that's bad writing. It should only apply when it's necessary for the film. But when we start talking about Piranha, like it was literally centered around sex, and it wasn't a great film. All the sex scenes in the Piranha 3D movie, it added no purpose.
What do you think about that? What's your take on this?
I think that it's all about time and place. I think it's unrealistic to have a sex scene when shit is going down because, like, how?
It depends on narrative.
I guess that's true.
That's what I think. I think it depends
there's
on
something
narrative.
to be said about like the emotions, what fear can do to you psychologically, and being able to have sex in a moment of fear and panic. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe something psychological.
Those are the most useless scenes, though.
Yeah.
When you have a horror film horror films are supposed to imply some sort of feel, and then you randomly got a sex scene, it doesn't make any sense.
No, I
to me.
agree. I
unless
agree with that.
unless it fits the narrative.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So what I hear you guys, so you're saying realistic, right? It needs to be realistic for the emotions of the characters.
That should be
in the
any
moment.
film, though, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, because in a horror
aside from
movie,
fantasy.
the point, okay, so Midsummer, right? Midsummer works for the aesthetic of the film, but I don't know that was a realistic scenario.
Javin, listen to me.
What? Okay, let's go. No, let's hear it.
Okay, so you say you don't know if it works for the realistic of the film?
I'm saying that scene didn't depend on its realism. It depended on how eerie the film is. That sex scene.
Right, okay,
Let me
yeah.
describe the sex scene. The sex scene is
Spoiler
where
alert.
the guy, one of the main characters,
Mm-hmm.
who is dating the actual main character. I forget names at the moment. He is invited into this place where he has sex with this woman, and there are a bunch of naked women surrounding him, and they're all kind of like sharing that experience, and it's really creepy because they're making a lot of strange noises, and he's tripping balls. He is out of his mind.
I also want to know
yeah.
that they've been drugging him for a while.
Yeah, they've been drugging him
from
for a
this
while.
being a very weird situation to begin with.
Yeah. So for those who are arguing realism, how many times have you been in that scenario?
Well, how many times have people been in cults?
two.
And
And so
the
my
average person
point is,
isn't in a cult.
and therefore realism isn't the point of that scene. The point, and I
That
further
still would be real, though. I mean, how many people are out here on Earth? Like what, 4 billion plus? There's a lot of weird people out here.
7 billion people, approximately.
Thank you. I wouldn't put that scene behind me, is what I'm saying. So
Okay.
you could say that's realism. Well, it is.
So, but what I'm arguing is that the point of a sex scene? I'm not even arguing that it's not.
It fits the sex scene.
What's the point of a horror movie?
To scare people.
Do you think that's the case?
Yes, more or less.
More or less? Well,
Yeah.
like, is it to scare people scaring can be, jump scare and I just scared you.
Yeah,
Is
those
that
are the whack
point?
ones.
Right. So, like, to disturb you, to make you feel disgusted.
All those,
Yeah.
yes. That all, yeah.
So, where does a sex scene fit into all of that? Are sex scenes designed to horrify, shock, disturb,
All right.
all of those things?
I'm going to let you answer the question because I feel like I have just so much shit
So
to
like
say
a
about
horror
it.
film is like a movie. So like a good definition of a horror film is a movie that makes you feel things that you don't usually feel in your day to day.
Okay.
Like super like you said, disturbing, unnatural, weird. So I think you could add a sex scene to a movie to add to those feelings because sex can be really it could be really creepy and unnerving and weird and uncomfortable. And so I think you really could add to the horror factor. Not and it doesn't. Yeah, sex. But
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, just could you like name an example? Have you like seen that personally, or is that just theoretical?
I think theoretical. I can't think of a movie off the top of my head that has like had a sex scene in it that made me feel uncomfortable, like in a horror movie.
Well,
But like
in Get Out, there's like comedy, right? Like, does it all
horror and
have to
comedy
be
go
that?
with each other.
So why do sex and horror go together?
They can, but my answer to that is it always depends on the narrative, on the writing.
Okay.
If it makes sense for the movie, for the script, then yes. But if it doesn't, if it's just thrown in there, like horror and sex have a intimate relationship.
Where?
There's so many movies.
Where are
out
they?
there.
Where?
I mean, even like, did I say Friday the 13th with
Friday the 13th?
I'm sorry, Friday the 13th. Like, I feel like in a lot of horror movies, there's a lot of fucking for no reason.
Yeah. I think that more times than not,
Right.
they just add sex.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Just because it's something
Just because it's something
entertaining that takes
Thank
up
you,
screen
Scarlett.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a statement?
Fuck it, it's a statement.
I think more times than
There you go, Scarlett. Yeah.
I think more times than
Bryson's
not,
adamant.
it's just like added there. For
And it is. It
flavor
really
added
is.
there.
It's
Okay.
pointless.
I think most of the time it doesn't match
Thank
the
you.
moment.
most of the time, but as long as it fits the narrative, then it's okay. But usually it's not okay because it doesn't fit.
So
the
you're saying
narrative.
it's just porn? Like it's just porn? and
Essentially,
horror
yeah.
movies? Isn't that weird though?
Listen,
Where did it?
in Game of Thrones, which is a series, okay, the sex scenes in Game of Thrones fit the narrative.
Of course, they do.
But I gotta be honest, that shit had a huge influence on me. I would watch Game of Thrones and just go to porn right after, keeping
Well,
it 100.
My point is, why horror? That's so arbitrary. Why
Yeah,
would you
well, that-
throw that into horror?
Game of Thrones isn't horror. I was just bringing up Game of
Well-
Thrones because they had a lot of sex scenes.
Okay.
A lot
Yeah.
of horror depends on cheap qualities like loud music and jump scares. Like that, a lot of it's for a lot of films. Not all. There's a lot of amazing horror films, but for a lot of horror films, it's cheap. They get your scares
Yes.
cheaply,
Yes.
and they get your attention cheaply. And sex is one of the easiest ways to get attention.
Thank you, Scarlett Senpai, for stating that.
Another statement. Woo.
Wow.
Wait, is that another? No,
There you go.
Okay. I can't remember which one's the statement.
Wow.
I would, yeah, there you go.
Buttons.
What do you have to say
Um,
about that, Javin? What do you think?
Okay. So you're saying it's cheap production value and a cheap budget, and so in order to
Generally.
get attention, that's what they
Generally,
do.
that's what
Yeah.
they do. Yes, definitely.
But you don't think there's an element of vulnerability in a sex scene where, like in Queenie and Slim, you mentioned, I'd say that scene was juxtaposed with the tension of the shooting, in the sense that they were being vulnerable in this tense situation while another person was being guarded and aggressive.
Right.
So sex scenes can invite a sense of vulnerability, which when you follow that up by a moment of danger and fear, you don't think there's a way to make that work? You don't think that's a highlight rather than a detraction? Why doesn't that work in those scenes?
In
You say
Queen
they're
and
just
Slim,
putting it in there.
Yeah, I can speak to Queen and Slim specifically because I saw that movie, and the only issue I had with the movie was the sex scene, and that I felt like it was out of place because
You did mention that, right?
I think it was a scene where they were being vulnerable with each other
Mm-hmm.
and they felt, they were, but I think that combining it with the scene of the shooting, like the lustfulness of the scene didn't seem to match with the direness of the other scene and the anger of the other scene. I can see how it can go hand in hand, but I just don't feel like it did.
Okay.
I feel like this
that
is
movie.
I feel like I'll go for it.
First off, this film isn't a horror film. Like, disclaimer.
Depends on how you look at it.
That's true.
Yeah,
Makes
you're right. It
you
does depend on how you look
disturbed
at
and
it, because
uncomfortable.
in real life it would be a horror film.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
true.
In real life. On
Real life is a
on
horror film.
it's
You
a
heard it here.
drama. Yeah, on
Suspense
film it's a
movies
drama,
count as horror
suspense, or whatever
movies,
you
and
want.
it's a suspense, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I would agree with that.
Could be a
What was I gonna say though?
You said that's not a horror movie, but
But
Well, it's not a horror film, but okay. For me personally, I feel like it did work for the film. I feel like it added intensity, and it showed the connection between these two people that essentially in the beginning of the film weren't connected. And you see through this issue how they've grown to each other to the points where they've been the most intimate with each other, which is having sex. Well, that's what I think.
But do you think it went well with the scene that was like paired with it, because it was like they were having sex,
Yes.
and then there was the scene with
And
the boy
I'm
and the
gonna tell you
gun,
why.
and
I
the-
think it did go well because it kept you engaged. If you watch the film in that particular scene, you are engaged. You are watching a kid, spoiler alert, shoot a cop, and you are watching two people who have grown this connection with each other be intimate with each other, which is keeping you engaged. And I think that when you're a content creator in general, you want to keep your audience engaged, and that's what it did. So that's
Well,
why I think it works.
yeah, go for it.
Do you
Well,
think
that was it.
No,
do you
no.
think that like that was a moment they super wanted people to focus on, and that's why they put the sex scene interpaired with it, because they were like, yo, we really want you to pay attention to what's about to happen.
And that's what they did, because we all paid attention, which is why we're talking about it right now, which is why you brought it up right now, because you paid attention. So yes.
Okay,
Okay.
so the goal I have is for us to agree upon a definition of a good sex scene in a horror movie.
Right.
So,
But that film wasn't a horror film.
No,
But,
it wasn't.
Yeah.
but it worked for that film.
It did
I
work for the
think.
film. No, it
not
did,
everyone
yeah.
agrees.
Yeah.
No, it did.
Clearly,
actually.
Scarlett.
Wow. When doesn't it work? You said when it doesn't match.
When
the
doesn't it
narrative.
work?
But what do you mean specifically? For example, in Friday the 13th, there are scenes of just camp counselors fucking, and then Jason kills one or the other, and that's that.
Are we asking
I'm
Scarlett
pretty
that
disenchanted
question?
with that scene. I'm asking both of you that question.
Okay.
Whoever answers.
I'm gonna let you answer, Scarlett.
What was the question?
The question is, why wouldn't sex scenes work in the cheaply made things? You said it's to capture attention, right?
Narrative.
It brings attention to the scene.
That has
Well,
to do with it.
Friday the 13th does its job. It's killing people, and for all intents and purposes, it's a classic. It's scary to some. It's not scary to me, but that's because I'm awesome and
listening.
brilliant.
I'm listening, Javin.
Why doesn't the sex work? Why are they laughable in that movie as opposed to different movies? You said because it doesn't match the narrative, and you said it's unrealistic to have that kind of to do that kind of thing in that kind of situation. But you said it brings attention, it leaves some vulnerability, and then he kills those people. Shouldn't that be shocking? Shouldn't that be disturbing? Why doesn't it work?
It feels like it should work, because like after sex is when people are usually really vulnerable, or during sex is when people are usually vulnerable. So I do see why it should work, but I feel like the reason it doesn't work is because sometimes the scenes themselves are laughable, which in the way that in which people get killed, and also because like the sex scenes are always very like, I feel like they're not realistic sex scenes. They're always very vulgar, and they really just want to. I feel like in the sex scenes in horror movies, all I ever saw was titty bouncing.
And that's what I'm saying.
That's
shit
it. That's all
doesn't
I ever
ever
saw.
fit
They
the
always
narrative.
wanted to like. They just want to show you some bitch
titties,
some titties being
yeah.
jiggled, and then that's
Thank
all
you,
you ever
Scarlett.
saw.
Okay, do you think there's some... Brysin,
I have to do
you
that.
are...
Because listen, a lot of the times in these horror films, the sex don't be fitting in the narrative. Like, and the perfect, well, I think someone who does this great would be Jordan Peele.
That's true.
Yes,
Well, did he have a sex scene in either of his movies?
No, he hasn't had a sex scene. but he does put horror and comedy together.
That's
well.
true.
That I'm saying that on that level, and I'm
I see
pretty
that.
sure someone on his caliber could put a sex scene with comedic attributes very well.
Yeah, I think the only reason it doesn't work, like I said, is because it's just cheap. Like they do
Yeah,
the sex scenes cheaply,
right.
And I think maybe it takes you out of it sometimes.
Okay.
Not all
Most
the time.
times.
So the sex scene needs to be relevant to the story, meaning
Yes.
the fact that the sex happened is important for the story.
For the story, for the
Right.
narrative, yes. And most aren't, which is the issue.
Okay. And then the other thing is the scene actually has to you have to be able to suspend your disbelief. You have to believe that this
Yeah.
matters, that these characters would do these things. Okay. Does that do those things alone make a sex scene in a horror movie good?
Yes.
Alone, those things are all you need.
Well,
So-
to my knowledge, I
think
mean, there
so.
could be more, but as far as what I know when it comes to film and just from watching a lot of film, which I've watched a lot of movies, yes.
Anything that takes you out of the movie is bad. Period.
Well, I feel like sex is just such a.
Hold up, I disagree with that.
Oh my god.
Yes. If,
what? Anything that takes you out of the movie.
oh wait, no.
is-
Okay.
I think is
Okay, when
bad.
I watch movies, I feel like this is what I think. If it takes you out of reality,
No,
then it's
out
good.
of the movie. Like
okay.
if you're watching
then yeah.
anything
I heard
and you're
wrong. I'm
like,
tripping.
yeah, you're watching
tripping.
anything and you're like,
Like when I watch a
You
movie, I
forget-
need to be taken out of what I'm currently.
you should be forgetting that you're watching.
I
a
should be
movie.
forgetting this shit. Like I should just be in the film. Like, damn, this shit's crazy.
Don't you think sex is just so provocative that maybe that's not the most effective tool to do
No,
what you guys are talking
I
about?
disagree. It's so natural and so real. We all have sex. Me, you, her,
It could-
the people
it
watching
could
us.
be,
It's a very real thing.
There
Yeah,
could be
we
a
know.
point to
Sorry,
that.
guys.
Natural.
Secrets out.
There could be a point to that though.
How do you
Could be
mean?
a point to that.
Let's hear it,
The only
Scarlett.
reason I watched a couple of horror movies when I was a kid is because I wanted to see the sex scenes.
And that's beautiful. That's because
it.
that's what
That's
you.
the only reason. I was like, I know that if I watch this movie, I'm gonna
And
see
that's
some titties.
normal and that's natural to feel
Yeah,
that
for
way.
sure. So I feel like
So there
it
is.
could be so provocative that it does prevent it from being able to do those things.
But
maybe.
but you're talking from a
That was
child's
me at a young
perspective.
age,
You're now
too.
a grown woman. Like,
Yeah, and now when I see some sex scenes in horror movies, I just kind of like roll my eyes. I'm like,
exactly,
okay.
because usually it doesn't make any sense.
Like this isn't even a
To the
good
plot.
sex scene. Like,
Right. My
it's
point.
not good. I don't care. It's fake. That's
Well,
not how it goes.
What about the sex scene itself? Don't you feel like that interaction is so distinct from other kind of interactions that people have that it kind of literally you're essentially pausing the movie to watch people have sex for like a little bit and then you go back into it. Can't you just imply that they had sex? Wouldn't that be just as effective? Why show it?
Yes.
Are we
I think-
pausing
I
the
think-
movie,
I think
Javin?
implying is just as.
What I'm saying is you're
effective.
I don't mean to interrupt,
I'm
but
fucking
you're
with you, Javin.
pausing.
I'm fucking with you. I heard you.
Oh,
He wants me to fight him. I don't know why he wants me to fight him constantly. I think it's this weird. Anyway,
I'll be the referee.
3 rounds, 2 minutes each. I can't survive longer than that. So my point is, why do you have to show it? Is there something visceral about the actual physical?
No, I don't.
Seeing
I
it.
don't think you have to show it. I think they show it because they want some cheap attention a lot of the time.
I agree with that.
What about you, Brett? You think so too?
Yeah, cheap. Listen, I just watched a video on What Culture. Shout out to What Culture because I appreciate them so much.
Appreciate us.
Anyhow,
please.
they
We're desperate.
uploaded a video like 3 years ago. I'll probably put it in the description.
Yeah.
But anyways, they did a video actually on this topic as far as horror films or sex scenes in horror films, and a lot of them are pretty useless. No, really useless. And
Useless as in they don't drive the plot forward, or useless as in why even show this? Why not just
Like the movie would have literally been exactly the same, if not just a tiny bit better, if
Right,
it was not
yeah,
for
because
this sex.
as
scene.
I
It's a waste
mentioned-
of my time.
as I mentioned earlier in the episode, like horror and sex have an interesting connection because usually in film, at least, like in a horror film, they'll have sex scenes that really don't apply to the narrative at all, like at all. And because of that fact, I'm like, yo, these are useless. But when you watch films that do actually, the sex betters the film, it makes sense.
Yo, that's kind of like how it is with a lot of different genres, not just horror. As I get older, as I have
Mature.
came into myself, I've been able to really recognize the difference between a good sex scene and a bad sex scene in any forms of media.
And most of it is bad because you're like, yo, excuse the car by the way, but most of it is bad.
Jesus, that's scary.
That sounded crazy.
That sounded super crazy through the headphones.
Was that? We have a live studio audience. Was that as crazy as I thought it was?
No, they were waiting there for like 5 seconds.
Really? They wanted to see
That's
us.
crazy.
Yo, I'm not trying to get
Yo, we're
shot.
cool, Javin.
okay. Well, back on topic.
Yeah.
What is so you're saying that there's a difference between good and bad sex scenes?
Yeah.
And I
yes,
think
there's a different. People know this too. Like I promise you. Like talk to most people that watch cinema, movies, or whatever.
Well,
like they'll tell you like, what's
a
up?
lot of people have bad sex, so I don't think a lot of people.
Shit, you
It's
know what,
not as
Scarlett?
it's not as called out as
Scarlett.
I think people.
She's right.
I
A
used
lot of
to
people
think
do
that
have
that's
bad
how
sex.
it goes, and so
Yeah.
I think maybe.
sex education. Educate yourself.
Which he is a huge
I'm
advocate
a
of.
huge advocate of sex
If you've seen our
education
previous
anywhere.
videos, which you
everywhere.
should check out.
All the
Everybody
time.
should be.
Because-
You have to be. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Are we gonna talk about sex education right
That's
now?
the real horror. That's
Oh.
the real horror of sex.
I like the connection.
That's a statement.
That is a
That's
That's the
fucking,
wrong fucking. There you
There
go,
you go.
Javin. Statement.
the true horror
And I'm gonna
of America
clap for you.
is that we're not educated in sex.
Yes.
It's
the
ridiculous.
True, I gotta repeat this for you, Javin.
Go for it.
The true horror of America is, you said sex education, right?
Is that we're not educated in sex?
Is
most
that we're
people
not educated in sex.
aren't.
That's some real shit.
So to get back on point, because we've still
time.
got we've got time.
We got time, Javin. Let's talk about this.
What about showing the sex scene? What about showing two people having sex? In Game of Thrones, it works because when they're having sex, it's called sex position. When they're having sex, it matters to the plot. Not only that, while they're having sex, exposition is being given. So you have to watch those sex scenes. And so what would normally be boring ass exposition becomes exciting and intriguing. Do you think
supposed to?
Okay, well, it does for me. I pay attention and I listen. What do you think happens in a horror movie when you watch two people having sex? Do you think you can accomplish that same effect where you draw somebody's attention in a certain way and you allow for other effects? Or do you think it's just redundant? It's just an attention grab no matter the horror film?
I think it could be similar to Game of Thrones. Like it has the potential, right? I think it definitely has the potential to be a lot better, and it could do things similar to sex position. I just think that most of the time they don't care.
That's what I'm.
It's just extra flavoring on the movie. Like, well, we just
Man,
had
Show
a
off her
sex scene
tits.
here. That'd be cool.
so you guys are generally disinterested in sex scenes.
Yo,
in
listen,
horror
because
movies.
most of the time,
Yeah.
these horror films don't be portraying the right sex that fits the film. It's mostly just some hot girl
Getting fucked.
getting
Titties
fucked
bouncing.
or fucking someone. You know, like that's literally it. It's never for the narrative of the film, for the story of the film. It's just
I feel
I'm
like
just
I
gonna show
saw a
off
lot of
this-
sex in Hostel that like was nothing for the
hostile.
story.
Oh, shit, I bet.
I,
Like, damn,
if I
seen-
remember correctly, I haven't watched it in a long time. But again, that was one of the
Same.
movies I watched just for like the sex. It was just
the fact that you watch. Listen, okay, let's talk about that.
because
Let's
there was a lot of sex scenes in
Right,
horror movies. It was
there
the
was.
easiest way to see some fucking titties.
Like I said earlier,
crazy,
horror
huh?
and sex have an intimate relationship. If I didn't say that, I'm saying it now. But anyhow, listen. Yes, the fact that you're thinking of a horror film in just a sexual matter is a failure within the horror film genre.
That's true.
Failure.
That's-
a whole
I mean,
failure.
hey.
A horror film is you're supposed to feel scared of it, not be sexually aroused to the film, which is what
That's
Scarlett is
true.
saying.
If
That's
I was
a
a
failure.
kid-
You don't think you can feel those things at the same time?
That would be
She's
interesting.
only
to
thinking
depict.
sex, though. It's a horror film.
Hey, there were
Listen,
there
this
were
is
horror
my
movies
favorite
that-
genre, so I have a lot to say about this.
Yes.
So when you tell me that you're supposed to be thinking sex of a horror film, it's like, no, you're supposed to be scared. You're supposed when you talk to your friends about a horror film,
Yeah, but-
it's supposed to be, yo, this film made me feel
So let me
weird.
tell
Are you
you-
as hell. I
supposed
was
to
scared.
laugh? Are you supposed to laugh while
You
you're
can,
afraid?
yes. Horror and comedy go hand in hand.
Why
I mean,
can't horror and horniness go hand in hand?
It can, but I don't think it has been done well at all.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
It can, but has it been done well?
Well, how would you do it well? And I don't like be specific. How would you do it well?
Well, I feel like perfect examples of this would be A Midsummer. It was done well. There was horror, and then there was a sex scene that worked for the film. I know for me personally, I felt kind of like erotic about it. Now you guys might say that's weird, but it worked for me. And this is to the people who have seen the film, of course. But it worked for me. So they did a great example of that. It was eerie, it was weird, it was erotic, and it all worked for the narrative of the film. It was there.
So I guess to kind of wrap things up, because we are reaching the end of our time, are we?
Right.
Yeah, we are. Get better horror just as a genre, and do more stuff like Midsummer, because Midsummer is a really good movie.
And we're talking to
you should watch that.
Right, we're talking to writers, of course.
Yes,
Or
directly
people
to
who
the
enjoy
to the
film
writers.
or who want to write, and that we're talking to you guys. They know who we are.
But more than that, like you guys said,
Right.
try to use sex scenes to suspend disbelief, to show vulnerability, to bring attention to the scene, and to literally move the plot forward, to use it as a meaningful way to describe what is going to happen next in the plot. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
Yes, question of the day. So, what great horror films have you seen that have applied sex to the films to better the narrative?
Yeah.
Put that down in the
I'd really like
comments.
to know. What about you? What would you say?
I think just along the lines of what you said, just do better. I mean,
better.
if me as like a
Which we could do.
12-year-old wanted to watch your movie because I wanted to see titties, like if it was like the Grudge, if there's a sex scene in The Grudge, I don't give a shit. Like I would not put that movie. I would stay 10 feet away from that movie because I was so scared of The Grudge as a kid. I don't give a shit if there was titties in it or not. So that's a horror movie done right. If they had a sex scene, I would still be scared shitless. Like you said, it does its job. But most horror movies, like, doesn't do. It's not even scary.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Well, see, if you guys don't feel the same way, I genuinely want to hear, because sex scenes in horror movies have been they've been so intertwined and yet constantly
They're bad.
described as very bad. So I wonder if any of you have ideas on this. Maybe we're missing something. Oh, by the way, just before we leave, we're not talking about like rape scenes or anything like that. We don't consider that real sex. We're talking about real actual sex scenes. Rape scenes and stuff for shock and effect are a different
That's a whole nother
category
discussion.
altogether. It's a totally different discussion. So
Yeah.
in case you guys were
And there's a
wondering
lot
about
to
that,
say about that, too.
don't worry. Yeah, there is a lot to talk about that. Okay, so great talk.
Yeah, we will see you guys
We'll
next
see
time.
you
Thank
next
you for
time.
stopping by.
Appreciate it.